Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. The Aga Khan Award for Architecture is organized around a series of 3-year cycles, each one culminating in the recognition of our award recipients. Tonight, we celebrate the outcomes of our 14th cycle. This is an extraordinary moment for me as I think back to our decision to launch this program more than 4 decades ago. What led to that decision, you may ask, as many have asked then and since. Just why should the Ismaili Imam become so deeply involved in the world of professional architecture? The simple answer lies in my conviction that architecture, more than any other art form, has a profound impact on the quality of human life. As it has often been said, we shape our built environment, and then our buildings shape us. This close relationship of architecture to the quality of human experience has a particularly profound resonance in the developing world. I believe that we all have a responsibility to improve the quality of life whenever and wherever that opportunity arises. Our commitment to influencing the quality of architecture, intellectually and materially, grows directly out of our commitment to improving the quality of human life. As you may know, over these 4 decades, we have recognized a vast array of architectural contributions, including over 9,000 nominated projects. But the value of this program goes far beyond recognizing specific projects. The Aga Khan Architectural Award is not simply a prize, it is a process. This process involves a wide range of conversations all across the world that shape the selection process. The theme of the cycle, which culminates today, is architecture in dialogue. This theme, which emerged out of the deliberations of the steering committee and master jury, sees architecture as a robust interchange, one that can embrace a variety of diverse and even divergent perspectives. A true dialogue requires not only that we articulate one perspective, but also that we listen attentively to other perspectives. More than that, it asks us not only to listen to one another, but also to learn from one another. The rich architectural dialogue we seek to foster should include a renewed respect for the rich diversity of Islamic cultures themselves. As a way to exemplify this concern, we recently opened a new Aga Khan Centre in London, in which 7 Islamic gardens have been created, reflecting 7 different Muslim traditions. In addition, we should be working to foster a rich dialogue with non-Islamic cultures, including diverse religious traditions. Architecture can lead the way in this effort, as we listen to one another and learn from one another across old divides. Pluralism means more than merely tolerating a diversity of influences and ideas. It also means welcoming the learning opportunities that diversity provides, finding ways to honor that which is unique in our individual traditions, as well as those values that connect us to all of humankind. We must think of diversity as a divine gift, a blessing, not a burden.
یا علی مدد، خوش آمدید، بیانوینو. از اینکه وابسته به جمع شب دیگری همراه من هستید متشکرم. نام من ملکه کریم راجان است و افتخار من است که امشب از همه اعضای جماعت، اعضای خانواده‌های چند عقیده‌ای و همه کسانی که از سراسر جهان با ما می‌پیوندند استقبال می‌کنم. من دوباره از وینیپگ مانیتوبا با شما ملحق می‌شوم و خوشحالم که یک بار دیگر در اینجا میزبان شما هستم. این هفته در مانیتوبا به طرز باور نکردنی سرد شده است. ما در این هفته منفی 35 درجه سرما را تجربه کرده ایم. بنابراین هوا بسیار سرد بوده است. بله، همانطوری که گفتم، با وجود این موفق شدیم با انجام تماس‌های ویدیویی خانوادگی در خانه بمانیم و گرم شویم. همانطوری که می توانید تصور کنید، ما چیزهای جدیدی را امتحان کردیم تا ارتباط خود را حفظ کنیم و یک فعالیت جدیدی که اضافه کردیم بازی بتلشیپ برای تلفن‌هایمان است. با کمال تأسف می توانم اعتراف کنم که خواهرزاده و برادرزاده 3 و 6 ساله من بارها و همچنین خواهرزاده و برادرزاده‌ام در تورنتو من را شکست دادند و من سعی نمی کردم با هر کدام از آنها که یک خاله خوب باشم تا بتوانم آنها را برنده کنم. آنها واقعا برنده شدند. اکنون خانواده های ما نیز برای حفظ ارتباط ما برخی کارها را انجام دادند و از آلبوم هایشان عکسایی را برای من ارسال کردند که بعضی از آنها را قبلا ندیده بودم که بسیار پسندیده بود و ما جشن‌های تولد را از طریق زوم جشن می گرفتیم. بسیار خوب است که ما می توانیم بسیاری از اعضای خانواده ما را از سراسر جهان از طریق فناوری ببینیم. بنابراین ما در اینجا در خانه بیشترین استفاده را می کنیم. من همچنین دیدم که دوستان و اعضای خانواده‌ام در بخش‌های مراقبت‌های بهداشتی واکسن‌های کووید 19 خود را دریافت می‌کنند. دیدن آن کاملا حیرت انگیز بوده است و همچنین دیدم که اعضای مسن جماعت ما دوزهای اول و دوم خود را دریافت می‌کنند. آنها بسیار هیجان زده شدند. به دست آوردن این محافظت شگفت‌آور بوده است و همانطور که می‌دانیم این چی تفاوت بزرگی در پایان دادن به همه‌گیری که اکنون در آن هستیم ایجاد خواهند کرد. من هم مانند بسیاری از شما منتظر دریافت واکسن خود هستم، اما مطمئن هستم که همه ما خوب خواهیم شد و منتظر نوبت خود خواهیم بود. و اکنون نمایش امشب در مورد اهمیت و نقش معماری است. ما پیش نمایش خود را با برجسته سازی برخی از برندگان گذشته جایزه معماری آقا خان آغاز کردیم و چی ادای احترام فوق‌العاده‌ای بود. حالا پشت سر من میخواستم این تصویر را با شما به اشتراک بگذارم و به همین دلیل امروز تصمیم گرفتم بیستم. این طرح از نوتردام یا نوتردام در پاریس است. هر چی دوست دارید آن را بنامید. این یک ساختمان نمادین است که در کل محله اطراف آن گره خورده است و به دلیل اهمیت آن برای شهر و مردم در سراسر جهان شما احتمالاً زمانی که آتش سوزی ساختاری در سال 2019 رخ داد پشتیبانی را به خاطر می آورید. اکنون برنامه امروز ما به این موضوع می پردازد که چرا مولانا حاضر امام معماری را بسیار مهم می داند. ما از اهمیتی که خود مولانا حاضر امام به محیط ساخته شده داده است آگاهیم و جایزه معتبر معماری آقا خان را در سال 1977 تأسیس کرده است. تا اکنون 4 دهه شگفت‌انگیز بوده است. حال چرا معماری بسیار حیاتی است و چه نقشی در زندگی ما بازی می کند؟ امشب بیشتر به این موضوع جذاب فرو می رویم. اما ابتدا ما نمایش خود را با برخی از سخنان رئیس کانسل کانادا امیرعلی کاسم لاکا از بخش 3 کتاب از قلب آغاز خواهیم کرد که در آن او مهارت‌های نرم مورد نیاز برای موفقیت در دنیای امروز را بیان می‌کنند. لطفاً از رئیس امیرعلی کاسم لاکا استقبال کنید.
My dear brothers and sisters, یالی مدد.
برادران و خواهران عزیز من یا علی مدد. امشب 3مین بحث از مجموعه سخنرانی‌های از قلب است. هر هفته ما در مورد یک ویژگی که برای موفقیت یک شخص در دنیای امروز بسیار مهم است بحث می‌کنیم. ما در 2 هفته پیش از 2 ویژگی که عبارت بودند از عامل ابتکار عمل و داشتن مهارت یا چشم‌انداز صحبت کردیم. امشب ما در مورد اهمیت فروتنی بحث خواهیم کرد. ممکن است بپرسید چرا ما در مورد فروتنی صحبت می‌کنیم؟ اهمیت آن در جهان امروز چیست؟ فروتنی یکی از قوی‌ترین ویژگی‌های رشد است. فروتن بودن به ایجاد اعتماد کمک می‌کند که خود یک مهره درشت و اساسی رهبری است و فراگیری را آسان می‌سازد. طرز دید ما را به اندیشه‌های دیگران باز می‌کند به طوری که ما می‌توانیم ظرفیت خود را سریع‌تر رشد دهیم. فروتنی می‌تواند تأثیر عمیقی در زندگی حرفوی ما داشته باشد، در مدیریت روابط، در محل کار، در تعامل با دیگران و به دست آوردن احترام. من تأثیر فروتنی بر خویشتن و دیگران را توضیح خواهم داد. فروتنی به معنی شکست نفسی و تواضع است. این یعنی آگاه بودن از خود بدون چشم داشت و توقع از توجه دیگران. فروتن بودن یعنی داشتن این دیدگاه و باور که عقل کلی است که سرچشمه الهام عقل انسانی می باشد و موفقیت ما وابسته به آن است. این که درک ما از جهان توسط این منبع که عقل کل است به دست می آید، نه توسط شخص خود ما و عقل انسانی ما. این طرز فکر می تواند به یک نیروی قدرتمند در تعاملهای ما با دیگران تبدیل شود. این ما را به گوش دادن به نظر دیگران هدایت می کند. ما را بیشتر به سوی همدلی سوق می دهد. مردم فروتنی را می شناسند و آن را در تعاملاتشان با ما حس می کنند و به روش قانع کننده و مثبت از ضمیر ناخودآگاه خود به آن پاسخ می دهند. آنها با ما احساس راحتی می کنند و بازتر می شوند و تمایل پیدا می کنند تا افکار خود را با ما شریک بسازند. تعاملهای ما به جای این که نابرابر و ناعادلانه باشند صادقانه تر می شوند و مربیان طبیعتاً وقتی که فروتنی ما را حس می کنند تمایل بیشتری دارند که ما را راهنمایی کنند و مسیر کاری ما را هدایت کنند. به عبارت دیگر مردم حسن نیت بیشتری از خود نشان می دهند. داشتن طرز فکر فروتنانه اثرات مثبت زیادی دارد، همانطوری که دهه‌ها تحقیق و پژوهش این مورد را حمایت می کند. افراد متواضع می توانند پایدار و ثابت بمانند و قدرت را در درون خود حفظ کنند. آنها نیازی به کنترل دیگران ندارند. آنها فشار روانی را مؤثرتر اداره می کنند و در سطوح بالاتر از حالت جسمی و روانی قرار دارند. آنها بیشتر از وضعیت اطراف خود آگاه هستند. آنها تصمیم‌های دشوار را با سهولت می‌گیرند و افکار خود را به راحتی در میان می‌گذارند. آنها تمایل دارند که در آزمون‌های معلومات عمومی نمره بهتر به دست بیاورند. بین فروتنی و ظرفیت کسب دانش یک پیوند و رابطه‌ای وجود دارد. فروتنی تأثیر مثبت بر قضاوت نیز دارد. با داشتن تواضع یک فرد به یک ارزیابی واقعی تر از خود، دیگران و شرایط و اوضاع می‌رسد. بگذارید لحظه ای را صرف این کنم که فروتنی چی نقش میتواند در پیشرفت شغلی بازی کند. ارتباط بین فروتنی و پتانسیل یا عامل بالقوه رهبری چیست؟ چرا استخدام کنندگان هنگام ارزیابی عوامل بالقوه بلند مدت و دنبال فروتنی هستند؟ چی ربطی دارد؟ افراد متواضع معمولاً به طور گسترده مشورت می کنند. آنها اندیشه های خوبی را که دیگران دارند و در یادگیری از آنها ایمن هستند تشخیص می دهند. رهبران مؤثر می دانند که آنها نمی توانند متخصص در همه امور باشند. آنها محدودیت های دانش خود را درک می کنند و متخصصین اطراف خود را تشخیص می دهند. بنابراین آنها از دیگران می پرسند و از طریق گوش دادن و قضاوت آگاهانه راه حل های بهتر را از دیگران بیرون می کشند و استخراج می کنند. بهترین مذاکره کنندگان در جهان سوالات زیادی می پرسند، زیرا آنها درک می کنند که راه حل مشکل آنها از طریق گوش دادن به دست می آید، نه از صحبت کردن زیاد. البته با نمایش فروتنی، رهبری و حمایت جنسی. این توانایی برای آغاز گفتگو و ایجاد اجماع یکی از ویژگی های پیامبر گرامی و محبوب ما حضرت محمد صلی الله علیه و آله و سلم بود که می تواند برای همگان یک الگو باشد. او یک مشاور عالی و طراز اول بود. این کیفیت بسیار خوبی از رهبری است که برای حرکت به جلو در جهان به سرعت در حال تغییر امروز لازم است. مولانا حاضر امام از این امر به عنوان رهبری سازش‌پذیر یاد کرده و گفته است که کلید این امر تواضع فکری است که ذهن فرد را مدام به دیدگاه‌های گوناگون باز نگه می‌دارد و از تبادل اندیشه‌ای کثرت‌گرایی استقبال می‌کند. من می‌خواهم یک لحظه روی یک تصور غلط و اشتباه مکث کنم. این باور که فروتنی ضعف است، اگر شما فروتن باشید از آن سوء استفاده خواهد شد، زیرا اعتماد به نفس ندارید. این حقیقت ندارد و من شما را تشویق می کنم که این مفاهیم را از ذهنتان دور کنید. فروتنی جدا از عزت نفس است. بهترین رهبران هر دو خصلت را دارند، هم فروتنی و هم اعتماد به نفس. آنها نیاز به کمک گرفتن از دیگران را تشخیص می دهند، اما به توانایی های خود نیز اعتماد دارند و می دانند که از طریق مشاوره و تبادل نظر تصمیم گیری های بهتری انجام خواهند داد. برادران و خواهران عزیز، من با یادآوری این نکته که فروتنی در ایمان ما نقش محوری را بازی می کند به پایان سخنان خود نزدیک می شوم. در هسته آن این تصور نهفته است که عقل ما وابسته به خداوند است. این نمایش فروتنی همان چیز است که ما را به دنبال جلب حمایت و رجوع به ایمان در زمان نیاز و ضرورت وادار می کند. یک ارتباط حیاتی بین فروتنی و سلامت ذهن و روان ما وجود دارد و بنابراین من جوانان من را تشویق می کنم که این مفهوم را درک کنند، زیرا فهم این موضوع برای هدایت یک زندگی هدفمند، ایجاد روابط موفق، پیشرفت شغلی و ارائه رهبری تأثیرگذار حیاتی است. با تشکر از شما و خدا حافظ.
رئیس صاحب، از اینکه این افکار را با ما در میان گذاشتید متشکرم. اکنون امشب ما افتخار داریم که مدیر جایزه معماری آقا خان، آقای فرخ درخشانی را با خود داریم. من خوشبختانه در اوایل این هفته با او صحبت کردم و در یک مصاحبه با افکار او آشنا شدم تا به همه ما کمک کنند کم بیشتر در مورد دنیای معماری و اهمیت آن بیاموزیم. آقای درخشانی از سال 1982 با این جایزه مرتبط بوده است و از 15 سال گذشته مدیر آن بوده. زمینه اصلی تخصص وی معماری معاصر جامعه اسلام و کارهای حرفه‌ای وی شامل طراحی و مدیریت ساخت کارهای عمومی و پروژه‌های زیربنایی در مقیاس بزرگ در ایران و همچنین طراحی معماری در پاریس و ژنو بوده است. وی همچنین در هیئت‌ها و کمیته‌های تعدادی از مؤسسات فرهنگی فعالیت می‌کند. آقای درخشانی به عنوان معمار و برنامه‌ریز در دانشگاه ملی ایران آموزش دیده و بعداً تحصیلات خود را در دانشکده معماری پاریس ادامه داد. اما قبل از اینکه از آقای درخشانی استقبال کنیم، بیایید نگاه گذرا به فعالیت‌های 2019 جایزه معماری آقا خان بیاندازیم.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have with us Mr. Farrokh Derakhshani. He's been part of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture for about 38 years, and you've been the director for 15. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'd like to start off with just talking about the concept of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. I understand that it started in 1977. A lot of people know these types of Coles Notes information, but tell us a little bit about what started it and why Hazar Imam wanted to do something like this.
His Highness, since he became the Imam, he was in charge of projects, building. There were all these schools, clinics all over the world that he had to go whenever he was traveling. Also, he had his own private programs in Italy, in Costa Smeralda. So he was dealing a lot with the architects and architecture. And he was not, in a lot of cases, he was not satisfied with what was the end products, because did not really fit to the needs of the people. And also the other thing is that he was seeing that people are losing identity. So because the Islamic world, they had a very rich identity, especially in architecture and this heritage. But the new buildings which were built, especially after the World War II, all over the world, they were not at the same line. It was something which it did not have any specific identity and quality. It was not only about the identity, but also the quality of the buildings, the quality of spaces were not good. So he was thinking how he could have an impact on making these better, correcting in a way, the way the architecture was going. But after some consultation with a number of experts that he was always surrounded by, he came up with the idea of having an award for architecture. And that's how the Aga Khan Award for Architecture's idea was created. It was born.
Wonderful. And we know that this is not just an award. It's just not a prize pin. There's a lot of criteria that goes into picking the finalists each year. And it's not just about the building structure. So I would like to talk about in 2019, the Aga Khan Architectural Award. There was a theme that Mawlana Hazar Imam had brought up in one of his speeches there. He was talking about architecture in dialogue. So for 2019, he did point to some of the reasons that the award finalists actually became finalists and then award recipients. Could you touch on some of those points and what Mawlana Hazar Imam is looking for in his work 4 decades later still?
Well, first of all, His Highness from the very beginning was explained that he does not want the award or these activities to become a school of architecture. It means it's not going to be something that this is how things should be built. What he wanted to do is to create an atmosphere, an enabling environment that you ask questions. And by asking questions, you come up with better solutions. The main criteria that which needs the quality is excellence. Excellence in approach. That's what I would say. Excellence in approach is very important because, sometimes you've got some project because of the conditions where they are, maybe they are not built the best way, but the approach of that, how they've come up to that solution is very important. So the other thing which was very important is that in 1970s, when His Highness created the award, the world was not looking at architecture as the way it's looking today. Because His Highness brought a new idea into architecture. It is how we can improve the quality of life. Quality of life was not a part of the thinking process of the architects and the decision makers at the time. And now we can see that more and more this is becoming a kind of a routine, that the architects are becoming aware that you have to be able to create a better quality of life. And that is what we can see. Now, how can we make a better quality of life? How can we have an impact? Is to better understand the context. And that's where dialogue comes. Dialogue, it means that there is this constant talking to the other, both ways, both the architect and the client.
The open dialogue that he said between the past and the future. I feel like that's something that our Jamaati members might want to learn about. So why is that one of the criteria or pillars?
As His Highness himself had put many, many years ago, he would have liked to have an architecture which is inspired by the past and have an impact on the future. So we are not looking at nostalgia. The worst thing to think about is that if we're going to have a kind of a nostalgic way of looking, building like how our cities were, or our parents did, or our grand ancestors, or whatever. This is not the way to do it. We're not going to copy the past. We have to be inspired by the past, not to lose the past. But at the same time, one has to look into the future. Future is very important. And it is always the role of architects and those who make buildings to think about what's going to come up. When you build a building, it's built today, but it's going to last for a long, long time, for many, many decades and even more. So it should serve people in the future as well.
Thank you. And a couple of more things that I wanted to touch on. Honoring your own culture, your Muslim culture and your identity doesn't have to mean that you're forgetting about the cultural identity of where you are currently. So talk a little bit about that for us and why that's important for Mawlana Hazar Imam.
You talk about the two aspects. The first was environment. In Islam, we're taught that we are inheriting this world, the earth, and when we leave, we have to leave it in a better condition. So this is very important, and His Highness is for him. It's very important that whatever he has been in charge as an imam, and he has been to leave a better place afterwards. So this is very important. That is today. These things are we talk a lot about environment. These environmental issues are becoming very à la mode, but in fact, it's exactly the same essence that what His Highness has been doing, and he's been following his ancestors' way of looking at the nature, because nature is the creation of God, and the human being has to make it better and not to make it worse. The second thing which His Highness was talking about was dialogue between cultures. I've been talking about this a lot, that we human beings are made of layers, and it is very important to understand this, that we have got layers and layers of identity and experience. In France today, over almost 10% of the population, 8%, whatever, are people who are coming from the Muslim people from North Africa. But they're not, you can't call them Maghrebins. No, they are French because they've been there for 2 generations. They're no different. However, they are different. It means they've got different layers, and these different layers should be seen as complementary.
Okay, wonderful. I'd like for a moment potentially to maybe look at some of the award recipients from 2019 to kind of highlight those aspects that you were just talking about. If we could talk about the winner from Bangladesh, I want you to explain. I thought that this was really interesting for me. The architect devised the solution of an amphibious structure that could sit on the ground or float on the water depending on seasonal conditions. I thought that was fascinating. So if you could please explain as to what that design was. I'm sure we'll have some pictures to go alongside here, and talk about that to the Jamaat, maybe those that don't know about it.
And that's one of the projects which has got a fantastic story. It's very interesting, the story from the beginning of it. The creation, it was created by a Bangladeshi teacher in UK that she taught there for many years. She took all her pension to go and build a school in Bangladesh. So the story itself is fantastic. Those people who know the Bangladesh, they know that with the floods, it's an area which floods every year. So the land, that all these rivers, all these streams, they just change path. So sometimes you've got a piece of land, it's yours. 5 years later, it is under the water. Again, 20 years later, it comes back. So it is something because the water moves. So with such a condition, they had to come with a solution. This is very important when you look at this project, as you can see in the images that now you're seeing on the screen. This is made of bamboo, and it's a very kind of a low technology. However, the person who's done that, he's someone who knows all the different technologies. He's as I said, he's been building buildings in urban areas, high rises, etc. But he knew he had to come up with a solution for that specific context. That is what we're talking about, dialogue. It means that he understood well what the context is. To build a school which, when it comes a few months a year, it can float and then it goes back. And not into that, then he had to do a lot of innovations. For example, how you can have toilets which are floating. And these are very important, very simple solutions, but very effective and very high tech in a way, but using simple materials. So this is a project which is in the service of the people, at the same time using the material correctly, coming up with new ways of doing things which we didn't know before. So it's got a lot of innovations. It is not just repeating what our ancestors have done, and that is very important.
All right, now I want to talk to you a little bit about your experience over the last 35 plus years of working alongside Mawlana Hazar Imam and also working alongside and with the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. So can you tell us a little bit more about what your experience has been and what you've learned over your time with the Aga Khan Trust for Culture?
Well, the first thing I was very impressed is that how much His Highness is involved and how much he knows. It's not a matter of he knows, it's like an encyclopedic way of knowing everything. No, he has got a way to see things and ask the right questions. And sometimes in meetings, he comes to the architects and he says, I'm not an architect, but then when he starts asking the questions, he asks questions from the architects that it's very difficult for them to answer because he's coming right to the point. What I understood from working all these years for His Highness was his vision, because he's not looking at today and the immediate things which are happening. His vision is long term, and that I think has been the most inspiring for me, that you're working for the good and you're not looking for an immediate reward of things. That's something which we're trying to do and explain it to the people. The second thing is the learning. We have to learn from others, learn from our own experiences, and learn from our mistakes. So this is very important, and we should not be shy of learning. So this is why we've also created His Highness has donated 5 chairs at Harvard and MIT. And within the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, we've got a continuous program for education. It's very important to share what we have learned with the others.
Wonderful. Kind of goes into our next segment when we're talking about city parks and city dwellings. What do you think about how the climate crisis will affect how we design spaces, especially in the developing world now? Going into that and looking at, is that something that is being looked at for the future of architecture as well?
I'm going to explain a small thing about the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. One of the things with the Aga Khan Award for Architecture is that no project which has been initiated by His Highness or there's any involvement of the AKDN can be nominated. So His Highness was trying, by creating the award, to show what good other people are doing good that we have to learn from. So it was kind of an exchange. But he understood that sometimes he has to create some examples, good examples. And that's how the park in Cairo, the Al-Azhar Park in Cairo, was created. Actually, it was during one of the award seminars in 1984 in Cairo that the idea of a gift to the city of Cairo as a park became, which His Highness continued it, and he put a lot of effort in it. And finally, after a number of years, it was inaugurated. And as you all know, it's one of the most successful urban projects ever. Now, he understood, but by starting that project, we have seen that many other parks has been created, parks and gardens. Parks and gardens are very important because they've got 2 functions. One is environmental, and second is social. Especially in urban places, parks are where where it becomes a social cohesion becomes possible, because you go there and you see other people. That what we were talking about, interculture activities, that's where it happens. It is in the public spaces, public areas. In 2016, the previous cycle, there was an award given to a public space in Copenhagen. You think about why Copenhagen, Denmark, that's not an Islamic country, but it was in a neighborhood with some 60 different nationalities were living. And the architects and the landscape designers and the people who made the concept of the project, artists, they created an urban space with all these different 60 nationalities can get together, can know each other. and it should be spaces that it belongs to them. So their symbols of their cities, their countries, their cultures are there, and they can just be together. So this is one of the important things about gardens. Second thing is that it creates, because it's very important, the green spaces in cities. And in a lot of cities, unfortunately, because the way it was developed so fast, there were no planning, not much space was left for parks. Everywhere is not Manhattan with a central park. So in the city of Cairo, even if you go to the Google map, you look at the city and then you can spot Al-Azhar because it's the only big green space there. And that shows how we can have an impact on the quality of life of people by creating these public spaces and parks in certain places, because it helps a lot with the environment.
Okay, I think you went right into our next question here, but I wanted to ask you architectural projects that have personally inspired you, and perhaps ones that His Highness has commissioned that you see as quite significant. So we're talking about the Al-Azhar Park, we're talking about sustainability, bringing that in. I believe that it was on a landfill. Is that correct from my knowledge from my high school Beit al-Ilm days? So just talking about that revitalization of that city, but also what are some of the other projects that you have felt potentially personally inspired by Mawlana Hazar Imam?
For the Al-Azhar Park, I should explain that what was important is the gradual way that the project develops. And His Highness is someone who has been able to enable this to work. What I mean is that the project at the beginning was only the park, but little by little, the whole area of Dalbar Ahmar, which was the connection with it, was included in the project. So the project became an urban project, and it's not only a park, it is the whole neighborhood. Because for His Highness, it was very important that how can you do development in one area and just leave the next door people in whatever they were. So this is very important, that we have got projects which are multidisciplinary. It is different approaches. Within the same neighborhood, education program works. The Aga Khan Foundation is active in health facilities, etc. It was the same in the Bagh Babur in Kabul. So it was working that how we can make around not only the park, but around it much better. So these are very inspiring for me. Another project for me, which I think amongst His Highness's projects is really one of the most, I would say, is a legacy, is the Aga Khan Hospital in Karachi. The Aga Khan University Hospital in Karachi is one of the best examples of medical facilities ever. Although it was built some 40, 50 years ago, some of it now has changed, a lot of additions, etc. But it has been an architecture earmark. It's very important. Well, you've got other interesting projects as well, because His Highness was keen to bring good architects to work for me. Back in 1986, Fumihiko Maki was a member of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture's master jury. And that's how he became familiar with the Aga Khan network. And then he has been the architect of three important buildings within the AKDN, the delegation in Ottawa, the Aga Khan Museum, and also the Aga Khan Centre in London. Charles Correa is one of the people who His Highness called upon him for the creation of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. And he later was the architect of the Ismaili Centre in Toronto. And it goes on and on and on this way. So there's this kind of involvement of the award and His Highness's architectural projects.
So how can the Jamaat play a role, Jamaathi members play a role to help advance Mawlana Hazar Imam's vision for the award for architecture and architecture in general?
Well, the first thing which is important is for the Jamaat to understand the importance of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture Aga Khan Trust for Cultures, different activities, because we've also got the Aga Khan Music Award, the Music Initiative, the Historic Cities Program, and the Aga Khan Museum. So all of these are a series of activities which are talking about dealing with culture. So understanding the importance of the culture within His Highness's messages is very important. Secondly, is that once we're talking about historic cities projects like the Al Hazar Park, like the park in Edmonton, like the many other projects, we are talking about our own projects. So yes, when you go to your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, and you want to explain all the activities of the Jamaat, it is important to explain these projects, that how wonderful they are. And the best way is sometimes to read some of the books and go a little bit deeper into not only the images, but what is the message of each of these projects.
Wow, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with Jamaati members about the award for architecture, the Aga Khan Award for architecture, or even, the understanding as to why this is so important for Mawlana Hazar Imam to continue?
I've been explaining this in different occasions while I was giving talks in the Jamaat Khanas or for ITREP or different people, is the importance of the culture, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture and Culture in His Highness's endeavors. First of all, what I want to I keep explaining that again. His Highness, the Hazar Imam, is not only the Imam of the Ismailis. He, as an Imam, has got a much more important duty to the Ummah at all. So that is very important. So he cannot do that without it's not only paying attention to education of people in rural areas. It's not only having hospitals or health facilities. These are very important, but you have to have also look at yourself, the way the mind goes, and cultural activities are one of the most important things. Culture is a basic need. It is an important part of development. And it is something which goes not only in these culture, it's very difficult to use the word culture development. We can use economic development, we can use social development, but it's difficult to say culture development, but it is important. And it has got the same impact in Canada as it has in northern Pakistan or Gujarat or anywhere else. So, because people have to become aware of who they are, what they are, and what are their aspirations, and what they get inspired from. And that is what His Highness is trying to give the people, to explain to them that we have to be proud of what we have, our culture, and we have to be able to tell the others how what we have is as good as what they have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Derakhshani, for joining us today and really helping us understand a little bit more about the need for architecture and potentially that there is more to it, right? That it's not just a building, like you just said. There's so many different aspects tied to it.
Thank you very much.
آقای درخشانی، از این که با ما پیوستید و کار الهام بخش بنیاد فرهنگی آقا خان را با ما به اشتراک گذاشتید متشکرم. و اکنون یک هدیه ویژه. من و خانوادم از چندین مرکز اسماعیلی در سراسر جهان بازدید کرده ایم. اما هنوز موفق به سفر به تاجیکستان نشده ایم. انشالله روزی خواهیم شد. بسیاری از شما میدونید که معمار مرکز اسماعیلی دوشنبه از کانادا فاروق نورمحمد است. ما بسیار خوشحالیم که آقای نورمحمد چند لحظه بعد برای یک گردش مجازی از مرکز اسماعیلی در دوشنبه در اینجا با ما ملحق می شوند تا با پیشبینی یک گردش واقعی در آینده یک نگاه داخلی از این مرکز را به دست بیاوریم. لذت ببرید.
My name is Farouk Noormohamed. I'm the architect of the Ismaili Centre Dushanbe. The Ismaili Centre in Dushanbe was commissioned as a competition by Mawlana Hazar Imam, where architects from around the world were invited, and we had a winning submission for the design of the center based on the design parameter that had been established for the project by Mawlana Hazar Imam. This was based on the mandate given by Hazar Imam for the design of the center, which was to reflect the Ismaili, Tajik, Muslim heritage of the Ismailis of the region. As you know, Ismaili centers are centers of excellence that are there to celebrate permanence of Ismaili settlement in any given region. And this is in what is traditionally called Pamiri houses. And these houses have 5 columns. And these 5 columns were a reminder of the Panchtan. And when the Soviets came in, they were not allowed to practice their faith. And these 5 columns reminded them of the Panchtan. This was a private expression which was within the family and only known to the family as a secret that was not to be shared outside. But as we were now building an Ismaili center, and the presence of Ismailis was to be celebrated as a permanent statement, these 5 columns could now no longer be a secret within the buildings, and we decided to create these 5 columns that would protrude through the building and symbolically hold up the sky. The design as it developed was intimately looked at by Hazar Imam in every detail. And we had a number of work sessions with Hazar Imam. And in these work sessions, Hazar Imam would always be looking not only at the design, but a broader aspect of how these projects would benefit the Jamaat and what are the things that we could do to make sure that the Jamaat has the maximum benefit out of a building like this. And one such meeting was in Dushanbe, where we had a work session with Hazar Imam and I had a small model, and very quickly Hazar Imam picked it up from my hand, went to the outside and started looking at it, and he saw the light streaming through this little model that I had made up. And it became something that one could never forget, because the level of detail and involvement Hazar Imam has on our projects, particularly the Ismaili centers and those centers where they are designed for a greater consumption, particularly to the outside world. Hazar Imam takes very, very detailed look at everything that we do, and he is very well aware of every aspect of the project. Let us take a walk through the building. As we go up the courtyard, there is a cascading water, and water is a reminder of the sustenance of life, and the sound of moving water creates a sense of tranquility. And with the facade of the building creates a sense of balance and geometry. The central portal is a reminder of Muhammad as the city of knowledge and Ali as its gate. Once through the gate, you are now in search of He who is above all else, and you come in and you see this grand walkway which has got a series of lattice panels in the ceiling which create a shadow on the side walls, which are made of brick from Uzbekistan's Samarkand area. The light and shadow play is a reminder that our life must always be in balance, a balance between the Zahir and the Batin. In this concourse, the spaces that open up are administrative spaces for the council and the institutions on one side, and on the other side, the council chamber, which is also used by other institutions, and a private office for Hazar Imam that Hazar Imam uses when he visits Tajikistan. Going beyond that is a view of the main courtyard, which we have referred to as the Great Court. The Great Court is designed stylistically as a 4-Iwan courtyard, 4-portal courtyard around a central fountain area, and traditionally a charbagh courtyard with 4 quadrants. Each one of the areas are part of the functional representations of the building. The 4 portals lead into 4 functional areas: administration, social, education, and prayer. So as one walks through this glazed walkway, as one goes left and then towards the prayer hall, you see the concourse leading into an open area, which is a pre-function area, which opens up into an outside courtyard. And we enter the social hall, which is traditional Tajik motif patterns on the floor. And the walls are embellished with carved plaster, which is a very traditional Tajik technique. And our recent Ismaili Centre in Toronto also has this carved plaster. And in fact, the same carvers that actually did the carved plaster at the Ismaili Centre in Dushanbe are the very same ones that actually did the carved plaster in Toronto. The courtyard is adjacent to the social hall, so from the social hall you can also enter the Great Court. Going beyond that, across the courtyard, you can see the charbagh courtyard with a central fountain, and leads to the other portal or exactly opposite this, which takes you to the educational center. This educational center is around a smaller courtyard scale and size, which is appropriate to children using it. And it is set up in such a way that it opens up into an amphitheater on the outside and to the library. And eventually, as one comes off that area, there's opportunity for you to go to the multipurpose hall, which is part of the educational component of the facility. And then it finally leads to the prayer hall, which is a culmination of all the experiences. So the first element that you see is an entry area where the space actually takes a change in direction as the prayer hall faces Mecca, but it's also one where there is a change in the floor material and a place where you take your shoes off. The design of the center is such that since it's so large and there's so much of concourse area, the coats are removed as you enter into the center, and one removes their shoes just as you enter the prayer hall, which allows you to use the whole facility without having to remove shoes except when you go into the prayer hall. The prayer hall, once you enter, there is an anteroom, and then there is a strong rhythm of the brickwork that is visible. The ceiling has the Tajik ceiling of the Pamiri house, which has got rotated squares with calligraphy around it. The whole space has got brick detailed in such a way that it represents the tradition of the region, but it is very, very Ismaili, because the front wall, the Qibla wall of the prayer hall, actually has the calligraphy which says the names of Muhammad, Ali, Hassan, Hussein, and Zahra, which is Fatima to Zahra. And this is done in glazed brick, and it soars up in the central tower. and the two flanking walls are almost a reminder of a person in prayer, and the light Nur of Allah basically coming in through three penetrations that are above in the tower, where light streams into the space, and a reminder of the spiritual journey of the human being. The side walls have got niches and perforations in the wall, which are a reminder of the Zahir and the Batin, and there are 49 perforations on each side, reminding one of the 49th Imam being the Imam that actually built this center. And the ceiling is made of wood that is celebrating nature, and the 5 steps lead to the center. The 5 steps are a reminder of understanding of our faith, where the ultimate goal of one's journey is to be one with He who is above all else. The Ismaili Centre is remote for most of us that can't travel all around the world, but I hope that you enjoyed this little tour that I've given you, and you will make it a point to get out there once it is open and safe to travel, but do travel to Uzbekistan first to understand the architectural heritage of the region, and then visit the Ismaili Centre, and of course go on to Korog, where the Korog Jamaat Khana is totally different and set up and based on the Badakhshani architecture, which is very local and vernacular. Thank you and Yali Madad.
عجب کار زیبایی. خیلی ممنون از گردش زیبا. و اکنون به بخش بعدی برنامه خود، جایی که فرصت پیدا کردیم تا از برخی از معماران اسماعیلی خود بخواهیم که در مورد کارهای خود و تأثیری که معماری در زندگی ما دارد تأمل کنند. امیدوارم شما از این لذت ببرید.
What inspired me to pursue architecture as a career was honestly looking through Mimar magazines in Jamaat Khana when I was a kid. When I was 9 or 10, I used to hole up in the library and peruse that until my mom and dad were ready to go home.
I began kind of my creative journey through visual arts, painting in the public space, on walls, murals, very influenced by graffiti. It was really an understanding as I started delving deeper into the Islamic arts. The architecture seemed to be kind of the completion of all the other forms.
I was very fond of mechanical engineering, anything to do with engines and moving parts, and I wasn't too sure if I would like the immobile status of the built environment. My father mentioned quotes from Hazar Imam. He said that architecture matters so much to the Imam, and the Imam is so heavily involved in the built environment. So that was a turning point for me.
I have always been drawn to architecture because I see it as an intersection between science and art. I was working on a project where we were focused on delivering sanitation facilities and infrastructure to rural housing communities in the province of Sindh in Pakistan. The community felt restricted with the limited infrastructure that they had, that the poor design of their homes and the spaces between their homes and outside their homes was impacting their lives and their lifestyles.
The dome of Medina Masjid, the contractor found me and kind of challenged me to paint this dome, which was 40 feet above the prayer hall. So I took on that dome, and I couldn't really find too much guidance on how to actually apply the geometry spherically to achieve this. It's a 16-pointed star and a radius of about 16 feet, 12 windows. So that project really pushed me to engage skills in terms of modeling and projection of geometry from architecture with my skills as a muralist in painting it. It took me about 1,000 hours, and so that really opened up a new dimension of my practice, infusing art and architecture together.
My thesis project was focused on flooding in rural Sindh. Livestock for a rural family is the source of food, income, and above all, it is actually an investment for them. When there are instances of flooding, the human members of rural communities are evacuated, but the livestock are left behind. In order to mitigate this loss of resource and life, my project, Social Infrastructures, focuses on redesigning and reimagining simple infrastructures such as bridges, embankments, and bus stops.
A number of TKN assignments for designing Jamaat Khanas in Badakhshan, Afghanistan. I love the way we've been able to work with different stakeholders and create this design that would be functional, that would be cost effective, and they have their own aesthetics, and they also have something to do with the culture.
The aspects of Islam that's inspired my work really revolve around balance. Having worked in sustainable design, we try to find balance in how we deal with energy and resources and how we integrate the environment in our work. Everything from living walls to solar energy and renewables to ensure we create healthy environments for people.
Islam is kind of very entrenched in my work, so when I was young, I decided that I'm going to actually study Arabic and learn classical Arabic, learn to read and write, so I could understand how kind of calligraphy evolved into graffiti. I'm not necessarily going out and reusing Islamic motifs. I'm more looking at the principles of geometry that are aligned with other traditions.
The ideal project I would like to work on in my hometown would be schools and places of education.
It would have to be to add to the existing open spaces in Karachi. Currently, the open spaces in Karachi lack ease and access for all, and they often take the form of secluded parks. But I believe that Karachi, with its warm months and the lovely sea breeze, can definitely be home to a diverse range of spaces that can contribute positively to the social and the ecological health of the city.
For Calgary in Canada, I've designed this Persian pavilion. The whole structure is made of 10 letters, Persian calligraphy of poetry, verses in praise of acquisition of knowledge.
Well, I have actually been pursuing my ideal project. It's known as X-Site. I designed this project where one container kind of rotates above another container and it follows planetary movement. The idea is that when the container is viewing a planet, it projects geometry, light and sound associated with that planet.
The projects that have been commissioned by Mawlana Hazar Imam that have been the most meaningful, inspiring to me have been Aga Khan schools. I've had the pleasure and benefit of working in Gilgit, Pakistan, where I got to see some of the schools that were made with very basic materials like stone and wood that really, for kids who have very little, were a very important place to learn and to play and to feel safe, and also to have teachers who brought that inspiration. I think that also extends probably to how my mom taught at an Aga Khan's primary school, and how important education is to the Jamaat and the future.
To me, the Aga Museum resembles a crown. It stands for the secular, the dunya, the worldly, and the Ismaili Centre resembles that of a hat. So that represents the spiritual. And then the reflecting pool, as the Imam said, is that moment of reflection, the interconnectedness, the relation between the deen and dunya.
The Dubai Center actually really struck me as a surprise because I think it was the most traditional of the Ismaili centers around the world. It kind of had these two worlds colliding. The way that the domes were executed were in a style of masonry that is like seldom seen, and it's really immaculate brickwork that's actually kind of representative of very high-end contemporary architecture that involves masonry. It kind of had this strong contemporary voice in a very traditional kind of form. The volumes and the domes and the kind of axis of entryway and how you move through the building was very traditional courtyard. So that project really stands out for me as one of my favorites.
To me, not only is the design of that individual building interesting, but also the relationships that it maintains with the context, the infrastructure systems that need to go in place, and the overall coordination between all the buildings on a site. Because all of those are important in creating a truly great piece of architecture.
با تشکر از همه شما، من می‌دانم که تعداد بیشتر معمار و مشتاقان معماری دیگری در جماعت ما وجود دارد. اکنون ما نمایش خود را مانند همیشه با بخش موسیقی مورد علاقه خود به پایان می‌رسانیم. من کدام اصلیه خوبی ندارم که بتوانم با شما در میان بگذارم. بنابراین خاله ها، مادران و عموهایی که میخواهند با ما کمک کنند تا ما احتیاج ما را پر کنند، ما آماده دریافت بسته مراقبت بعدی خود هستیم. هر زمانی که میخواستید آن را ارسال کنید. از همه شما که امشب با ما پیوستید متشکرم. من واقعا اوقات بسیار خوبی را برای میزبانی از شما گذراندم و برای همه شما آخر هفته عالی آرزو میکنم. یا علی مدد.
दिशा में है तू ही दिखे, किस्सा अकीदत का कैसे लिखे, दीदार से तेरे मिलता सुकून, आनंद ही आनंद है क्या मैं कहूँ, नूर का साया रखना सदायों, नूर का साया रखना सदायों, होगी हम पर तेरी इनायत, अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन वाले मुहम्मद, अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन वाले मुहम्मद. Listen to the angels calling your name, wanting for the mercy of your flame, this light you've bestowed upon us today. All of the darkness is now gone away. You are the Noor, son of Ali. You are the Noor, son of Ali. You are the progeny of Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wale Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wale Muhammad. ओ मारा मौला तू ही जे सलाम, शाही ज़माने